Alright, little guy, here we go. Be free. Yep. That sums up adulthood. If you've ever painted an entire army, struggled to learn a new technique, or even just tried to paint something that you had a very specific idea of in mind and failed, you know the hobby frustration. That weird mix between having fun and wanting to jump headfirst out of a window. But sometimes all we need is a little bit of a shake-up. I recently picked up this Kitsune model from Pharaoh for their game Conquest, Last Argument of Kings. And since I don't actually play Conquest, I just wanted to paint the model. There's not a lot of stress involved with this one. So I'm going to take this as an opportunity to paint in a few styles that I don't usually run with and colours that I don't use all the time. Slightly.
To make life easier, I kept some things in sub-assembly, but I did blue tack everything together for priming and a zenithal. Step 1 in painting outside of my usual habits is using the paint that I use the most often. But that's not my fault, we're going to blame the army painter because this is probably one of the most versatile paints on the market. Usually the skin's really the last thing I do just because I don't paint a lot of skin or models with skin and I don't really enjoy it. I also generally make armor and clothing the most eye-catching part of the miniature. So then when it comes time for the skin, I usually take my cues of where I need some brightness and some balance from that. Now the recipe that I'm going to be using is also an old favorite and I've done an entire video on it, Pachow. So if you want to see how I actually paint skin and usually build up in layers, then go check that one out instead. After this one, because I need the retention. But what I'm going to be doing differently here is instead of building up the layers from darkest to lightest and blending every time I change color, I'm actually going to be painting this in like a topographical map with every single color layered and sitting on top of each other and then go back to blend it all together. This is something generally referred to as sketching. I've seen Vincey V do it 100 times and if I'm being completely honest, it's never quite been my style just because I've never quite gotten it right. But one thing I found with the sketching style is it makes highlighting so much easier. Instead of working up blends as you go, it does get a little bit murky sometimes on where to put the highlights, and if you have put the highlights in the wrong spot, you have a lot of work to fix it up. But being able to separate the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights with all the prowess of PS1 graphics, it kind of made it easier to see. For me personally, I don't think I'm going to stick to this technique as an everyday thing, but it was actually pretty helpful. And now to get rid of all these big jumps in layers and contrast, I'm going back in and creating a 50-50 mix between the two colors that are right next to each other and kind of making a transition color. And because lighter colors don't typically glaze very well, this is all mostly layering. And to those of you who don't know how to glaze or don't really like glazing, this should be good news to you. You can absolutely get smoother blends just by building up gradual color increases. It is possible, we do have the technology. It can just take a little while.
If you're wondering, yes, I did paint the face, yes, I did film it, and no, you can't see it. A corrupted memory card ate it. Let's do the dress.
Oh, look at that, Terrestrial Titan's back. But we do also have a newcomer in Gothic Blue. For the dress, there's two main ideas that I really want to try out. The first idea has more to do with the color. What I'm aiming for is some kind of intensely blue silk that has a greenish turquoisey kind of reflection or, shine. So to start with, I have to create some kind of deep blue base, which is where Terrestrial Titan and the Gothic Blue comes in. The Terrestrial Titan is going to be our shadow colors. Dropping a purple in for blue shadows is probably one of the peak hobby moments. But that Gothic Blue is also going to have to do a lot of work because I'm going to start to put that into anything that's roughly mid-tone or highlight area. While I'm working with both paints while they're wet, and yes, technically I suppose it would be wet blending, I'm not really worried about creating smooth transitions. Because one, this is kind of just having fun and painting for the sake of painting. And two, this comes into the second idea that I wanted to try and achieve with this model. And that idea is loosely replicating the Spanish way of miniature painting. You may recognize this from, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you get your daily fix of plastic crack painting. But there is a whole host of miniature artists out there, generally from Spanish-speaking countries, that do not worry about blending at all. Instead, the miniature seems to be painted with more of an idea of precise strokes, creating ideas of light and how things just should be. But every time I've tried it, it just looks like an absolute hot mess, like an actual dropped pie. But every time I make a non-metallic metal video, I do stress the importance that light placement is a lot more important than smooth blend, so it's time to put up or shut up. Also, yes, I did go back to Gothic Blue just to smooth out a few transitions because I couldn't help myself. And honestly, I think this is actually the part that saved me. It wasn't a perfect blend, it was just one more gradual step between, deeper blue and a very light blue. But now that we're into highlighting, it's time to try and pull out the other idea of going back to that color changing satin. I could have jumped to a turquoise from here, but I wanted to go just a little bit more onto the green side, so I went with a teal. And all I'm going to start doing now is basically pick out all the sticky outy and pointy uppy bits. Everything that is facing directly up is going to get a highlight of this, so it looks like that's kind of where the light is the most intense. And it was roughly around here that I realized that I was basically just doing the same thing that I did with the skin. I was just sketching in all of the highlights. And again, just like with everything else, I found myself basically drawing out a topographical map. All the deepest, darkest colors were in the recess, and now that we've got some fairly broad jumps, we can actually see all of those layers sitting on top of each other and starting to build the shapes and volumes that we're working with. And now I'm going to pull out Afterglow, which is the lightest, brightest color in the vibrant green flexible triad from the Army Painter. I thought about going with Ice Yellow, but I do that all the time, and I kind of wanted to stick to a little bit more greens instead of going too warm and into yellow. I honestly don't think it would have made too much of a difference, but I wanted to try something new, so this is just kind of where we ended up. And of course, for placement, we're doing the exact same thing. It's just all the sharpest corners, all the highest points. That's what's getting all of these spectral highlights added in. And just like the skin, I suppose because of the way that we've sketched everything out, that it wouldn't be too big of a jump to go back and create those half steps and start blending everything back if you wanted a more smoother finish. And I'll be honest, I definitely wanted to do that, but at this point I had to commit to the bit. But that also would have taken quite some time, and I kind of wanted to knock this out in a day.
Use the code Heresy5 and get a little discount off your paint. We get a kickback and you get cheaper paint. Use it at the Army Painter or in games. And we have a Patreon.
After the satin, we're pretty close to non-metallic metal country. But if you've ever seen gold, satin or silk, you know that it kind of behaves a little bit differently to metal. While it's still reflective, it sits weird. Which means I also couldn't just sit back and do the same old thing that I do all the time. And I'm going to be completely honest here, this one scared the shit out of me. While I still wanted to show shape, depth and contrast, I didn't want to go to that heavy set contrast that I do with metals. So instead of starting incredibly dark, I started from the mid-tone, hoping that if I pushed all the highlights into one direction and kept it somewhat cohesive with the light from the satin dress, it would still look golden reflective and not just like a big pile of brown. Big pile of brown is also what my wife called me the last time I fell over. Painting this way actually turned out to be a pretty good idea because the warmth from the gold and the yellows and all those ochre tones, it kind of pulled in and balanced out from the skin tones. After I built the highlights to as far up as I could go into pure ice yellow, I then came back with a little bit of a glaze of blanched berry and just kind of added in some details and added a little bit of color depth. It wasn't a lot, it was just enough to separate some detail and kind of shade down some tones. Ah, Terrestrial Titan's back, imagine that. Look, straight up, I wasn't looking forward to the tail. And yes, I pulled out the airbrush because there was no way I was doing this with a traditional brush. This whole idea is to be fun and not a chore. Which is also why I didn't fill any of the gaps in this thing. After the Terrestrial Titan hit basically everything from underneath and some of the mids, I came in with Pixie Pink and did the exact opposite. I came in from a higher angle and still aimed for some of those mids. This is just a really quick, dusty highlight. I wasn't kidding, I really did just want to get this done. So busting out the Aqua Alchemy, I just aimed for just the tips of the tails. Because a Kitsune is essentially a fox spirit, I wanted to make it look somewhat ethereal and mystical. Seriously, look at all those gaps, it's ridiculous. This tail's like 20 pieces. Also, I had to be pretty careful here with the color selection because I didn't want to make it look like a mystical fart. Now with Aegis Aqua, I'm basically just going to be shooting for the very end of the tail. Again, this is just a really quick, dirty highlight. But pulling in the purple, teals and blues really did kind of help sell it as an entire model. It kind of really pieced everything together with that silk. But to really sell that magic fox energy, we then came in with some Royal Robe speed paint and literally just shot directly from underneath. It's not so much a glow, but you know, it's doing something. I also felt that it was getting a little bit too bright and light, and we really kind of had to pull out some shadows and put some more shape into it. Seriously, it would have taken an entire day to get rid of all those damn gaps. If I have to do another one, I'm just going to make a tail out of Play-Doh snakes. Painting this was a little bit uncomfortable because it's completely out of my wheelhouse. Not in the way that it turned out, but in the way that it got there. But having a little bit of experimental fun instead of having a set goal was really something. And 10 out of 10, absolutely would recommend for anyone.
I'm going to paint the Kitsune, a mix between having fun and wanting to make love to a chainsaw. I recently picked up the Kitsune model from Conquest a mix between having fun and wanting to paint the wall with the contents of your head. I recently kicked. A mix between having fun and wanting to put a paintbrush up your nose until you hit the reset button. From Conquest. A mix between having fun and wanting to travel back in time to give your mum pro-choice pamphlets. This isn't a real people job.
As always, a massive thank you to InGames, the Army Painter, and the best Patreon members in the world. Big love, you filthy heretics.